Japan educates its women to a higher level than nearly anywhere else in the world. Its girls come near the top in education league tables compiled by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development (OECD). But when they leave university, their potential is often wasted, at least as far as the economy is concerned. Female participation in the labor force is 63%, far lower than in most other rich countries. When women have their first child, 70% of them stop working for a decade or more, compared with just 30% in the United States. Quite a lot of those 70% are gone for good. The Japanese Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe, says he wants to change that. In April 2013, he announced that allowing women to shine in the economy was the most important part of his Abenomics growth strategy. Raising female labor participation to the level of men's could add 8 million people to Japan's shrinking workforce, potentially increasing GDP by as much as 15%, according to Goldman Sachs, the investment bank. More women working for more pay would also increase demand. Hence speeches from Mr. Abe attaching newfound importance to matters such as the opening hours of kindergartens and the challenges of breastfeeding outside the home. For the Prime Minister, who belongs to the Conservative Liberal Democratic Party (LDP), this is quite a turnaround. In 2005, when a previous government was taking steps towards greater equality, Mr. Abe and his fellow conservatives warned of the damage to family values and to Japanese culture that could result if men and women were treated equally. Their concern was not just based on tradition. Keeping women out of the workforce, conservatives thought, made economic sense too. If the country's baby-making machines, as a former LDP health minister put it, stayed at home, then they would produce more babies, and thus more workers. This insight proved to be mistaken. As the LDP encouraged women to stay at home, the fertility rate, already low, plunged further, bottoming out at 1.26 children per woman in 2005 before edging up to 1.41 in 2012. The consequent shortage of young people means that Japan's working-age population is expected to fall by 40% by 2050, exerting a powerful brake on the economy. As a solution to this, the direct measure of getting more women out into the workforce would have great advantages over the indirect tactic of encouraging them to stay at home in the unfounded hope that they will breed instead. Indeed, it may even turn out that working and having children go hand in hand. In other rich countries, higher birth rates nearly always accompany higher female employment, and in Japan itself the birth rate is higher in the countryside, where more women work, than in the big cities, where fewer do. The changes that might encourage more urban women into work, such as better childcare provision, and shorter working hours for men and women alike, might persuade them and their husbands to have more children, too. Mr. Abe's interest in all this is new, but the problem itself is not. Yoko Kamikawa, an LDP politician, who has recently been serving on the party's new committee to improve the position of women, says that she is surprised by the lack of progress since 2007 when she became Minister of Gender Equality during Mr. Abe's first term as Prime Minister. In most countries, women's participation in the labor force dips around the years when they marry and bear children, after that it recovers. But this M-shaped curve is much more noticeable in Japan than in most other rich countries. Japan's curve has flattened out somewhat in recent years. In 2004, the rate of full and part-time employment for 30 to 34-year-old women was 61%, a figure which by 2012 had risen to 69%. Yet young, married mothers are still largely absent from the workforce, and many women returning to work go into part-time or temporary jobs with low pay and little security. Those who stay in work often do so in jobs that waste their abilities. Few women hold professional, technical or managerial roles. In 2012, they made up 77% of Japan's part-time and temporary workforce. Some of these workers are well-off, married women seeking a little extra income. But many are poor and insecure. The uncertain existence of such workers was described vividly in Out, a very popular 1997 crime novel by Natsuo Kirino. The heroine, who spends her nights slaving away in a soulless box lunch factory, helps conceal the murder of a colleague's no-good husband. Ms. Quirino's subsequent bestsellers have also focused on the division of gender roles, describing men endlessly at work in the corporate world, disconnected from women in the home. At the very top of corporate Japan, the bamboo ceiling, so called by women for being thick, hard, and not even transparent, is starting to let in some chinks of light, but they are few and far between. In 2011, 4.5% of company division chiefs were female, up from 1.2% in 1989. But relative to other countries, the numbers are still very low. Of the most senior managers in Japan, those at executive committee level, 1% were women in 2011, according to a regional study by McKinsey, a leading management consultancy firm. The equivalent figure for China was 9%, and for Singapore 15%. Corporate culture is by far the biggest obstacle for Japanese women. The practice of hiring graduates fresh out of university and employing them for their entire working lives makes it difficult for employees to take career breaks and seek new positions elsewhere afterwards. Promotion tends to be based on overtime and how long they have been in the company, rather than on productivity and performance. And straightforward discrimination remains commonplace. In a study that compared the reasons why Japanese and American college graduates leave their jobs, American women cited childcare and looking after elderly relations as the main factors. Japanese women blamed dissatisfaction with their jobs and a feeling of being put into dead-end roles. The fact that their husbands, who spend more time at work than their counterparts in other developed countries, also give less time to childcare or household chores, adds to the perceived need to stay at home. When Japanese firms take their pick of university graduates, they choose both men and women, but they still prefer men for management, sticking most of the women on the clerical track. Kedenran, the most powerful body representing business interests in Japan, has been decidedly uninterested in doing much about this. Although government pressure recently got Kedenran to start internal discussions on promoting female employees, corporate leaders regard Mr. Abe's new enthusiasm for improving the position of women in the same way as they look on reforms to corporate governance, as costly distractions from the task of increasing the profits of Japan Incorporated. Kedenran refuses to ask its members even to state the number of women on their boards, in fear of being asked to increase it, or having quotas imposed. Many commentators fear that Mr. Abe lacks the political will to overcome such resistance to the reforms in corporate culture that would not only improve the position of Japan's working women but also give a major boost to the economy.